Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 713, and today's date is July 10th, 2015, and the title of this episode is Greek People Take to the Streets to Protest the Austerity Deal. Now, before I get started here, I just want to make an announcement. Tomorrow, I will be uploading an interview with Chris Duane. So if you are on the X22report.com alert system, you will get an email if you subscribe to YouTube, to the YouTube channel X22 Report Spotlight. You should get an email from YouTube. If not, just go right to YouTube, type in X22 Report Spotlight. It will bring you right to the channel, or you can come to the X22report.com site. You will see the interview on the right-hand side, and you can watch it from there. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, out in Greece, we understand the banks are still closed, and we're seeing that cash withdrawals from the Greek banks reach about 100 million euros a day from the country banking system. Even though the banks are closed, people still have the ability to take out money, and everyone is doing it. Cash withdrawals are at a high rate despite capital controls. Banks in Greece have been effectively passing cash among themselves, while the pressure increased in recent days to maintain and keep control of the cash. Because if these banks stay closed till Monday, these banks are going bankrupt. If they go bankrupt and they're insolvent, guess what? They're going inside the bank to take the money. And we see that Greece has extended the market shutdown. They extended the closure of its stock exchange, electronic bond market through at least July 13th. Mutual fund redemptions and clearing and settlement on the Greek exchange were also suspended. So things are not opening up like they thought was going to happen. And right now, the banks, they said they were going to open on Friday. They still haven't. They're still closed. And we're going to have to watch this situation very carefully. But we know when Greece receives debt from the IMF, it does not help them whatsoever. John Taylor is out there, and he's saying the reality is that of the 230 billion euros in Greek bailouts 1 and 2, only 11% of this amount trickled down to the Greek population. Greek debt has risen consistently to a record high of 175% of GDP, even with the PSI, also known as private creditor debt restructuring, which took place in 2012. The vast majority of the debt has gone to cover repayments to banks exposed to Greece. This is why the people are suffering. This is why it's not good for the people. IMF loans to Greece make it worse for the Greek people. It doesn't make it better. The IMF should not make loans to countries with unsustainable debt. And what's very interesting about this is that way back, the IMF said they wouldn't do any of this. They put up a mandate, but when the Greek situation happened, they completely bypassed that mandate and they said, okay, we will make bank loans to them. And every central bank will do this. I mean, they will go ahead, they will loan the money because they realize once that country is in debt, they have control of it. They'll make money off of it. And this is what they're in business for. Their product is debt. Plain and simple. Now, Tspiras created a new proposal that he's submitting to the creditors. And basically, it looks like he's selling out the Greek people, because the proposal he made is very similar to the one that the Greek people said no to. So this, at this point, doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And we see that if there is austerity and the creditors accept this, which for some reason I don't think they're going to, but we'll have to wait and see. The new proposals, it includes more austerity for the Greek people. And it will be distributed equally among them. The banks are going to get their money. The Greek people are going to get austerity. And this is why we see right now the Greek people have taken to the streets. Thousands of Greeks have once again taken to the streets in show of solidarity as Tspiras attempts to rally support in parliament for a deal with creditors that looks almost exactly like the deal they voted no on. And at this point in time, I don't know how this is going to sit with the people. The people elected him. The people voted no. And he submits a deal that they all voted no for. Did someone get to him? We know Victoria Nuland visited Greece back in March. We know that they're pushing for some type of coup d'etat, and we're going to have to watch this very carefully. I mean, Russia says they will help Greece if they ask. Now, Putin was out there saying, listen, they have not asked us for help just yet. They haven't asked us for any aid to overcome the debt problems. So at this point in time, Russia's sitting on the sidelines. But if they do ask, we will come and help. And we're going to have to watch the situation in Greece very closely because, as we can see, the creditors are looking over this new proposal. Of course, they left out pension cuts. And for some reason, I don't think the creditors are going to accept this. Things are going to continually stay closed down. I'm hoping that Tspiras is just buying time by submitting the same exact thing without the pension part. And the creditors say absolutely not, because eventually they're going to have to make a decision on what they're doing here because they can't agree on anything. And we've seen signs of the drachma showing up in Greece. We know Putin and Tspiras have been talking. We know Russia now sent out the signal saying, yes, we will help if you need this help. And I'm wondering if Tspiras set this whole thing up to say, listen, we tried, we submitted a proposal. They just won't accept it. We won't accept what they have. Russia, can you help us here? But we'll have to watch this very carefully and see how this turns out. Now we see another problem in TD Ameritrade. It looks like their order routing system kind of fell apart, and orders that were accepted are now stalled. It looks like they resolved the issues, but it's very interesting how all of this is starting to occur here, and I feel like the market's trying to come down. Things are happening, and they're using excuses right now to explain away why this is happening. Because you have to remember, the central bankers, they want to use a controlled collapse of the system, because they could have used the cyber attack story, just like they did with North Korea. Just like they did with China and espionage. They could have just said, yeah, it was China. They hit our financial systems. We have to push the legislation through. But I think this completely took them off guard at this point. And they weren't prepared for this, because you have to remember, every time something happens, the government is very good when they are completely prepared and they're controlling what is going on. And they planned it. They know from the agencies, everything is set up. There'll be a cyber attack. We know it's going to be from China, North Korea, Russia. We're going to blame it on them. Here's the evidence already. We've already planted it. But when something unexpected, the government cannot handle it. The government is a bunch of losers who don't know how to handle real problems. And when something real happens, they won't be able to handle it. And this market that was coming down, they didn't know what to do. They weren't ready to blame it on someone. They have nothing planned for it, so they just flipped the switch. And of course, they canceled everything. So we can see right now, this whole thing from the economy to the wars, they want it all planned out. They want their story ready to go. Because as we know, as soon as it happens, a couple hours later, when they report on it, and they tell you who it is, you know it's fake. Without any investigation, without any research, they know everything. Think about that for a second. Think about when MH17 was taken down. Think about when anything happened, and a couple hours later, they have the entire story. They know everything. This is how you know it's fake. When the big event occurs, you will know right away. They will come out an hour or two later. They'll know exactly who it is, who they're looking for, who did it, how they did it. I mean, look at 9/11. Same thing. Now, here in the United States, what else are we seeing? Well, we're seeing the economy completely fall apart right now. The U.S. government central bankers are telling us we're in a recovery. The Fed is telling us everything is fantastic. And Bank of America is reporting that their internal card data from people using their credit cards, debit cards, that people aren't spending money, either online or in brick and mortar stores. Nothing is happening. Things are declining. Sales are declining. The economy is declining. And then there's a report coming out from a firm called Green Street, shows malls are disappearing across the country. Green Street senior analyst DJ Bush said, since 2010, more than 24 enclosed shopping malls have been closed. An additional 75 are on the brink of shutting down. Now, when an economy is booming, when people have jobs, people are making a good living, retail expands, home sales expand, the auto industry expands without all of these ridiculous programs to bring in these subprime people. We are not seeing this whatsoever. We are seeing the opposite happen. And people say, oh, it's the internet. They're making all the sales. No, they're not. The internet is not taking up the slack, because if it was, we would see a direct correlation of sales dropping off in the retail market and sales increasing online. But guess what? We don't see this happening whatsoever. We would have seen it this past holiday season. Cyber Monday, a complete flop. Black Friday, a complete flop. The holiday season, a complete flop. People didn't go from the stores to the internet. People had no money to spend. That's what we're seeing. People don't have the jobs. That's what we're seeing. Now, we're seeing in wholesale sales, they rose a mere 0.3% month on month, missing expectations of 0.9% rise. But sales tumbled 3.4% year on year, the most since the financial crisis. What should be worrying everyone right now is the inventory to sales ratio holding at recession levels. So what we're seeing right now, this is flashing a red light that we are heading, I'm going to say it's a depression at this point in time. It's not even a recession. We've been in a recession. This bubble economy is not a people's economy. It's a central bank economy. And the only place where inventories are really soaring the most is, guess where? The auto industry. Because guess what they're doing? They're channel stuffing. They believe if they continually build this stuff and they channel stuff the automobile industry, people will come out and buy it. And this is why they keep modifying the programs, bringing in all the subprime people, because they need to push the debt. And we see right now, despite 22 years of correlations and obvious causations, asset gatherers and commission takers still think this time is different and channel stuffing. And if we build it, they will come inventory. Overbuilds will be bought away in a swarm of fresh-faced, creditworthiness consumers. But guess what? It's not happening. Not this time. Because peak debt is upon us. They have to go down deep in the barrel to find those people to purchase the goods, because there's a lot of people out there that do not have good credit. They're working part-time jobs, and they will accept anyone now to purchase an automobile, to purchase a house, because they need everybody in. They need to push the debt further and further. And they're running out of people to do this. And we see they're bringing in the illegals. They bring them in. They allow them over the border. They can't deport them. And guess what? These are fresh, new faces that can go in, purchase a car with no credit whatsoever. They can go in, apply for a house. Who cares if you have a job? Get a job because they're receiving working papers, and the companies don't have to worry about that $3,000 penalty because these people are not covered. Now, I have nothing against people coming into this country. America, at one time, was an incredibly fantastic country. I think it's gone downhill quite a bit. I think the fascist government employees, central banking corporations have completely turned this country upside down. And those people that were looking for freedom, those people that were looking for a new start at life, this was a great place to come and do this. And there were certain procedures you had to go through. You had to go through a criminal background check. They had to make sure you didn't have a disease. And then they let you in, they go other checks and they let you into the country. Just jumping the border fence didn't allow you into the country. Most of the people who are jumping the border fence, a lot of them are criminals. A lot of them have diseases. They're not being checked out. And if they truly wanted to enter this country, why can't they go through the proper channels? What's wrong with that? Just like every other country. And if these people who are coming here just come over the border and they're accepted, why do we have borders? Why do we have guards? What's the purpose then? Because if they push these people back at this point, they're going to choose a different area to climb over. Why do we have checkpoints? It makes no sense anymore, does it? Now, Janet Yellen is out there, and she is saying that everything is awesome. The fundamentals of the U.S. economy are solid. We're not predicting any type of recession or depression anytime soon. We're not forecasting it whatsoever. Wait a minute. They said that back in 2008. When we did have a recession and a complete crash of the system. She sees some tentative hints of a pickup in wage gains. Really? Where's this? Labor market has improved, but not fully recovered yet. Well, don't worry. They'll manipulate the numbers some more, and they'll take it from 5.3% to 4.9%. With the snap of a finger. That's how many jobs they'll create. Or fake it. She says she expects moderate growth this year as a whole. Really? So the first 2 quarters were negative GDP so far. And she's expecting it to really pick up, and it's going to be fantastic for this year. Really? I guess they're going to be planning out a lot of manipulated numbers, leaving things out, massaging everything, the data, to make it look good, because at this point in time, how are things going to get better? Because they would have, because if we use common sense, the unemployment is at 5.3%. We go back 3 years ago when it was 9, 10%, and then it came down all this time. Why is everything getting worse? Why was this last holiday season the worst we've seen in a long time? Why are thousands of stores closing? Why are mortgage departments laying off? If more and more people getting employed and have jobs and wage growth, it's starting to grow, the economy's getting better, why is the opposite happening? Why are they creating these programs to help these people coming out of college to modify their loans if there's so many jobs out there that are high paying? They wouldn't have to do that. Why would they accept subprime people into the auto industry? They wouldn't have to do that. Why did Freddie and Fannie change their requirements for people to purchase homes and drop it to 3%, where 3% down, where some banks dropped it to 0%, and you could be subprime? Why? if everything is fine, if people have work, you would see the opposite happening. This is how you know this is completely fake, phony, and false. And of course, she says, yes, the way everything is going, it looks like we can raise the rates this year. And the only thing that can delay this is something unexpected, an unexpected event. So this is what I think they're going to do. I think they're going to raise the rates maybe sometime in the fall here, just a little bit. And then all of a sudden, I think we're going to have an unexpected event. Hey, listen, the economy is recovering. You see, we're raising rates. And then all of a sudden, look what happened. And I think this is how they're going to control everything. This is how they're going to get their story straight. And we're going to have to watch this very carefully as we approach the fall. Now, we all understand that the United States, UK, Europe, New Zealand, Canada, and many other countries, they all created the bail-in documents. And Goldcorp's director of research, Mark Byrne, joined Gordon T. Long of Financial Repression Authority for an in-depth discussion about bail-ins. And they're saying the bail-in legislation, while underreported in the mainstream media, is actually at a very advanced stage. He quotes from the Bank of England's former Deputy Governor, Paul Tucker, who, following a meeting between the Bank of England and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation in October 2013, said, U.S. authorities could do it today. And I mean today. The Fed's Stanley Fischer has said that the U.S. was preparing such legislation after Tucker had indicated that such legislation was in place. The EU is also at an advanced stage in forcing countries to ratify bail-in legislation. And we know the EU came out and said, listen, to the 13 countries, get your ducks in line. Get the bail-in completed. You have a certain amount of time. And we know this legislation is put into place not to protect the people. It is put into place to protect the banks, to protect the central bankers, because they realize governments at this point in time, they are not going to bail them out. And all these tests and all these things that we've been hearing about the banks being ready for a collapse, why do you think they're doing this? They're testing the procedures of going inside and taking the people's money. They're testing the procedures to protect themselves, not the people, themselves. This is what we see happening right now, because we know sooner or later it's going to happen, just like in Cyprus and now Greece. And this will spread across all the private Western Central Bank countries. And people are going to wake up one day wondering what happened. Now, in the last couple of days, we've seen James Comey, he's the FBI director, talking about encryption and how he needs to protect the people. And right now we know the NSA, FBI, CIA, and other government agencies, they're pushing to completely outlaw encryption. Americans, on the other hand, they want privacy. They don't want to share their private information with the government agencies or anyone else in that matter. Because if you weren't concerned about privacy, you would walk up to a person and say, listen, hey, how you doing? This is how much I have in the bank. I had an affair the other day. Oh, by the way, I keep all my valuables in the safe. And if anyone in the government wants to know, I can give you a duplicate key to my home if you like, and I will give you the combination to my safe, and have, no problem giving you this, because I don't care about my privacy whatsoever, and I trust you. But people don't do this because they realize if they do that, they know people will then pass it along, it will be used, and things will be stolen, your private information will be taken. It's the same thing with encryption. But what's very interesting about this is that encryption, I've said this in the past, has been around for a long time. And those people who fought for our freedoms, the founding fathers, more than 200 years ago, Guess what they used? And there were no computers back then. They used encryption, a form of encryption, ciphers. And we can see right now, the NSA is doing to modern Americans what King George did back in colonial America, which was one of the main reasons the Founding Fathers launched the revolution. There were many other reasons. Benjamin Franklin was called a traitor, like Edward Snowden, for blowing the whistle on the government's actions. Interesting. Encryption seems like it's a brand new thing. People are just hearing about it. James Comey saying, oh, we can't protect you unless there is encryption. But this is very old, and it goes back thousands of years. And the Founding Fathers used this extensively to pass their messages privately between each other, because they didn't want the government knowing what they were doing. The generation of actors that framed the Constitution and the Bill of Rights were sophisticated users of secret communications, and they used secret communications to protect and advance the political objectives that they most valued. Encryption was free speech. John and Abigail Adams, his wife, used a cipher provided by James Lovell for family correspondence while John Adams was away from home. He didn't want other people, like the government, reading what he had to say. Thomas Jefferson frequently made recourse to encrypted communications to protect his private thoughts, to convey confidential information, and to protect valuable political insights from prying eyes. Even after the Revolution, the Founding Fathers continued their use of encrypted communication after the Revolutionary War. After the adoption of the Constitution and before the ratification of the Bill of Rights codes, ciphers and other forms of secret communication were used by the Founding Fathers to speak freely only to those people they wanted to address. The need for secrecy and confidential communication has continued throughout American history. The courts have always treated encryption as lawful. The courts have always treated encryption as legal. The Constitution protects all forms or types of expression or communication that meet the following three-part test. Those modes of expression or communication are protected which are historically demonstrated to have been in widespread use as an adoption of the Bill of Rights, which are shown to have been sanctioned in use by the framers of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and which are shown to have long continued in use. Those modes of expression or communication which meet this three-part test may not be prohibited to the people, and may only be regulated when they are abused to accomplish some otherwise illegal purpose. And this is coming from Washington's blog, and if you want to read a little bit more about that, I have that link here on the report. But basically what is happening here is they are using it to spy on the American people, and they don't like that they can't do it. They want to know what everyone's thinking, because you have to remember, this system is coming down, and you have the right to protect yourself any way you possibly can. Just like you lock your car, you lock your home, you seal an envelope when you mail it. This is no difference. And whatever you can do to make it harder for them, this is what you do. You use encrypted search pages. You encrypt your email. You block them from tracking you. You can use Pocket. You can go to blockitpocket.com. They have these sleeves you can slip your phone into. It blocks the signal. When everyone gets the new license from DHS that has the RFID chip, even the credit cards have the RFID chips. You can protect yourself. They have little sleeves that you can slide it into. It blocks the signal. They can't track you. People can't steal your information. Anything you possibly can do, you need to do it. because this is part of free speech, and they can't take it away unless we allow them. And guess what? I'm not allowing it. Now, out in Afghanistan, we see Afghanistan and Russia, they are going to be united on combating terrorism in the country. Well, this is going to pose a problem for the United States and the central bankers, because they're the ones who created the terrorism in this country. They're the ones who wanted to get into this country because it's a strategic location. They create and grow the poppy fields to sell it as opium across the ocean, to pay for covert operations. There's oil, there's lithium, there's copper. They know China and Russia are there. And this is going to pose a problem in Afghanistan, because now they're joining forces to fight the terrorism. And when they find out, who are we fighting here? Because we know most of the terrorism is being done by the U.S. government. Kiev right now is receiving lethal weapons from several European countries. We see that the Ukraine's newly appointed ambassador to the U.S., Valerie Chally, said, yes, we are receiving lethal weapons from over 10 European countries. And I wouldn't be surprised if the U.S. government is covertly sending lethal weapons into Ukraine. Poroshenko says terrorist threat in Ukraine has significantly risen. He said on Friday the threat of terrorism has significantly risen in Ukraine. The level of guerrilla and terrorist threats in the regions outside the zone has created a problem for them. He said weapons were being trafficked from the conflict zone, and that police resources were often directed on the east rather in the rest of the country. So he's blaming the terrorist activities in the east of the country. How interesting. And he's hoping that this new police force that was just trained, they will be able to combat this. And you can see they're building up to what is coming. Now, a new report was issued by the Pentagon, National Military Strategy of the United States of America, 2015. The document announces a shift of focus from terrorism to state actors that are challenging international norms. It is important to understand what this actually means. Governments that challenge international norms are sovereign countries that pursue policies independently of Washington. Basically, it's countries that don't agree with what Washington is doing. We don't agree with you, and we're not going along with this. And who are these countries? Well, it's the same players. Russia, China, North Korea, India, Iran. You name it, it's these countries. And they're saying the threat is the existence of sovereign states whose independence of actions makes them revisionist states. In other words, their independence is out of step with Washington, with the United States government central bankers. And these countries pose a problem. We see that the P5+1 talks have been extended to July 13th. And Russia right now in Yemen is sending humanitarian aid. As we know, they are having a ceasefire. They'll be bringing in humanitarian aid, and Russia is going to send an aircraft with food supplies for the citizens of the country. And they're urging that all countries send aid to Yemen. Now, Saudi Arabia, they are continually bombing Yemen, and they hit a German aid convoy in Yemen. Why were they targeting this? Well, we've seen them target aid convoys before. Of course, they're saying this is it's a mistake, we didn't know, blah, 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 blah. And we can see at this point in time, they don't really want the people to have aid. They don't want people receiving the food, the medical supplies. But again, the world is looking at this, and if they push it off too much, and I'm talking about the United States government and Saudi Arabia, it looks very suspicious. So they let a little bit of aid in there, and then they start the bombing once again. Now, Turkey has reportedly agreed to allow the United States to use one of its air bases to launch airstrikes in Syria. So let's see now. We have the U.S. using an airbase in Turkey for drone strikes and other strikes into Syria. We have them trying to push a safe zone in Syria, a no-fly zone in Syria. The proxy army for the United States government central bankers has been pushing towards Damascus. The Free Syrian Army, there's reports now from the resort city of al-Zabadani, and they've confirmed that the Western-backed Free Syrian Army fights alongside Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, that these groups are working together and they are moving towards Assad, Damascus. And at this point in time, we can see that they are using all of this and the additional propaganda of chlorine weapons to make their move into Syria. Because right now, the U.S. delegation to the UN revealed a draft resolution yesterday which calls on Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to form a joint investigation to look into who is using chemical weapons in Syria. So they're going to assemble an investigation team, and they're going to go to Syria to find out what is going on there. It's the same thing that happened right before August of 2013 when they said Assad is using sarin gas. The UN inspectors went into Syria, and this was in the request of Assad and Putin, to look at the evidence that they were not using chemical weapons. And while they were there, all of a sudden there was a sarin gas attack. And we've come to find out that it was the Free Syrian Army that caused this. Now we have the UN putting together a team to go and look once again. Do you think something is planned to happen during the investigation? Absolutely. And this is what they're going to use once again. We can see it's all planned out. They're ready to go. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.